Today I'm going to show you guys how I make my soy wax candles. I use a blended wax which is soy and coconut. The addition of coconut wax just gives the candles a wicked hot throw. And I'll go through the process step by step and make it super simple for beginners and just anyone else watching. First up, we're going to need some good candle supplies, wax, wicks, jars, and some scent. Personally, there's not much point in making a candle if it doesn't smell good. Before we get any further, if you're a candle making novice or you just bloody love candles, I'd appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Right, with that out of the way, let's crack on and make some candles. The wax I'm going to use in this video is SCX, and that's what I use for pretty much all of my candles. It's from Candle Shack, and it's got a beautiful creamy soy sort of coconut blend, great scent throw, and perfect glass adhesion. I also use transparent labels, and I want them to be aesthetically pleasing, and with this wax I get no frosting, I get lovely smooth tops, and they just look beautiful. So that is just an example candle. The wax you can use may vary. I recommend just sticking to soy wax. Temperature guidelines are roughly about the same, but always check with the manufacturer's website just to be sure. They might have slightly different melting points. And the wicks I use for these candles are CL wicks between 14 and 17, depending on the scent. And I found this wax really hard to wick properly in the beginning and to get a nice even melt pool. It took days of testing. Stabilo Eco TCR wicks, they just didn't cut the mustard. The scent I'm going to be using today is patchouli and rosemary, which is a blend of fragrance oil and essential oil that I do myself. So that's it for supplies. Let's quickly look at the equipment I use. We've got a soup kettle, a Presto pot, the workhorses of my operation, cheap and cheerful. And we've got some cheap plastic jugs, an incredible technical stick for stirring your candle wax. And I've also got some wick holders and a Wickmaster 3000, but we'll get into that in a minute and I'll show you how I wick my candles because it will blow your mind. Step 1, turn on the wax melter, fill it up. I then heat the wax up to about 70 degrees Celsius. Whilst I'm waiting for the wax to heat up, I wick my jars. The hardest part in this process is hacking away at the wax slabs. You know, you get the big 20 kilo ones and you gotta go full on Johnny! Right. Step 2, wicking the jars. Time to get the Wickmaster 3000, patent pending. It's essentially a pen without the pen, but for the purposes of this, it works perfectly. So you get your wick in there, it doesn't fall out, and I use grey gasket silicone for the wick glue, a method I've borrowed from Stanley Handcrafting. Oh, thank you. And it's heat resistant. The wick will always stay in place. Sometimes with the glue gun or Wickums, the wicks can come free if it gets too hot. This industrious glue, there is no chance. And with this method, you can easily crack out and wick 50 jars in about 10 minutes. Simple. Step number 3. Need to check the temperature of the wax. I'm aiming for 70 degrees Celsius. I'll add my fragrance oil at 65, and then I'll pour my candles between 50 and 55. This might go against the grain of a lot of other candle makers or the suggested traditional method, but I find that I get a better hot throw when I add the fragrance oils a little lower. I feel, subjectively, when I add them at 85 degrees, it burns off some of the scent, and this is all anecdotal, but from my testing and my personal sort of methods, I believe this works for me. And what I recommend is you guys do your own testing and see what works for you. But I add the oils a lot lower, and I find I just get a better, long-lasting, better scent throw with all of it hot and cold. Once at temperature, I'll weigh out the candle wax. The candle jars I'm using are 1 pound honey jars, which hold about a 400 gram capacity. But from my testing and fluky methods, I know I can get 270 grams of candle wax in each jar with a fragrance load of 10%, which takes up the total wax to 295 grams, which basically fills the jar perfectly. And like I said, I know this from my testing and it was more or less guesswork. There are actual methods you can use to find out the volume, but I haven't really got the patience for that. I'm just a doer, so I just cracked on and worked it out myself after a couple of tries, and we get a perfectly full candle like this. In this jug, I can get 4 candles worth, so that's 1,080 grams of candle wax. It's important to weigh everything when you're doing candles. It's not volume, it is grams. Everything has a different density, the fragrance oil, the wax, a lot of different variables between fragrance oil. Not all fragrance oils are the same, so you have to weigh everything out in order to get accurate candles that work every time. And it's worth writing this down. Every candle recipe you do, it's worth just making a note of it so it's logged. That way there will be no room for errors. Step number 4, once the wax is at 65 degrees, it's time to add the fragrance oil. I use roughly 10%, so I'm going to pour 100 grams of fragrance oil into this jug, and I'm going to stir it for a couple of minutes. I want to keep stirring it to really incorporate the scent. As it cools down, I go back to it periodically and just give it a stir every now and then until I get to the desired temperature where I'm going to pour it. Once the wax temperature gets down to about 50-55 degrees Celsius, I start pouring. I already know from my testing that I've got 4 candles worth of candles in this jug, so I split that evenly between all 4 jars. Once I poured the candle wax in, I use the wick holding tool just to center the wicks and keep it nice and level. And then step number 6 is to trim the wick and lid the candle, allow it to cure. The website suggests a 48-hour cure time for SDX candle wax, and through my own testing, I believe this to be about right. I don't really know if you get a better scent throw from leaving it to cure for several weeks like a lot of people do. In my mind, it just sounds a bit bullshit, sorry. But that is just my subjective opinion. Test it for yourself and see if it makes a difference. Try a couple of days, try a week, try 2 weeks, and just see what you think. Step number 7, labeling. I'll give you a quick run through of how I do my labeling. So I've got this one at the front here, and I've had all my artwork on Fiverr sort of done for me, and then I make the labels on Canva, and then I purchase the labels through eBay. These little transparent ones are pretty cool and something different. I then pop a CLP label on the bottom of the candle, attach some twine with a logo on. It just makes it stand out, and then job's a good one. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the video on how I make my soy wax candles at home. This is my method, and it's from my testing. What works for me might not work for you, and man, did I do a lot of testing in the pursuit of the perfect candle. And I think it's potentially something that might not exist. Although these are pretty damn good and they're pretty close, I just think there's so many variables that you just can't get a perfect product all the time. Temperature variations will adjust the product and such and so forth. But you want to produce something that's good, and you want to produce something that adds value to the marketplace. So alrighty guys then, if you have liked the video, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and then just subscribe to the channel. Thank you.